I wanted to be 100% sure that
Sure.
this is the order I need to join, that this is the vocation. And it's like, man, if that's the case, then no one's going to do anything. In 2023, I received a phone call from Italy. By the way, don't ever answer a
Never
phone
pick it
call
up.
from it. It actually said Italy. It said Italy, and I'm like,
Yeah.
what the heck is that? So I have a couple of photos of when I was in high school, and like I'm showing them on the overhead, and there's
Yeah.
my prom picture with my date,
Ooh.
and one of the guys, Jake's in the front. He goes, "Wow, father, wow, you looked pretty good back then." And I looked at him like, "Well, thanks, Jake. Maybe someday someone will say the same thing about you." And he goes, "What?" I'm like, "Just think about it."
So, Tito, I have a question for you. When you were
Right.
in high school, college, elementary school, whatever, were you ever on student council? Were you ever class president?
No.
Ever run?
I was a representative, but no, I never
Oh,
ran. Too much outside of class responsibility, and I was already involved in sports, multiple sports at one time, so no time.
is it because people didn't trust you?
Oh no, like I said, I was a representative of my class, just not president. So the representative was much easier, much less time intensive. But I
Okay.
think people trust me. I think people trust me.
Well, we won't delve into that. But I ran one time. I
Okay.
was a freshman, and I ran for class president. And I was so excited, and I had like a great campaign, and I had all these friends that were going to vote for me. And then I was utterly shocked when I lost. I probably lost by like 90%. I have no idea. But the like really smart kid won. And I was
Uh-huh.
like, well, oh well. I guess I don't know if that made me feel better or worse that I didn't lose to the popular kids, because it's always the popular ones. But it
Mm,
was like the smart ones. So
mm.
I don't know.
Yeah,
Things we hold on to for 20 years.
yeah, that happens sometimes. I mean, don't get me wrong. I've lost out on other things that I really wanted, but that was not one that I pursued. But yeah, I feel for you. I feel for the child in you.
Yeah, well, I'm actually kind of happy I got that out of the way, so I wasn't a politician in high school, didn't go into
Okay.
college, you know.
Hmm.
But someone has to lead, and we're
Yes.
thankful that some people lead that are not me. And we're glad that it's not a popularity contest, and we're glad that it's about people who are just good people, people that we
Hmm.
can trust, people who can
Yes.
lead us. And thankfully, we have counselors and provincials here in the Friars that are graciously giving their time to serve us, and we
Hmm.
have an opportunity to talk to one of those gracious men today. Please welcome to the show, Roger Lopez. Roger, welcome.
Welcome.
Thank you, Casey. Thank you, Tito. It's good to be here.
Excellent.
Is this something you dreamed all your life, to be a provincial counselor?
Well, no. So absolutely not. The
Hmm.
well, I don't know what I really dream for the future. I don't
Yeah.
think management or leadership or administration is one of them.
Mm. Would you compare being a counselor to being like a representative? Is that a good parallel for what that job is like?
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the best things is that I think ideally, like I see my role is I am there to support my brothers. One of the best ways to support is to be there
Hmm.
um, physically, on the phone, email, whatever it is, but also to help them navigate certain things of life. So ideally, I think that's the role of a representative is not just for me to speak on their behalf, but also to be there for them.
Mm.
It's interesting. So you were a counselor for your former province before we joined together. And then it was not a vote. So unlike our high school forays into this, you were appointed by Rome. How did you feel when you got that call or that letter saying, hey, by the way, you have a promotion?
Well, so in 2020, when COVID happened, our province, my legacy province, was supposed to have a chapter,
Mm.
and I was selected by the general definitorium of the order to be a provincial councillor. So I was selected then. And then in 2023, I received a phone call from Italy. By the way, don't ever answer a
Never
phone
pick it
call
up.
from it. It actually said Italy. It said Italy, and I'm like,
Yeah.
what the heck is that? Yeah,
Pass. I don't
and
know anyone in
right,
Italy.
yeah,
Certainly
note
no
to
one I want to
self.
talk to.
Right.
So, and then the general visitator asked, so both of my terms of serving I've only been selected. I've
Mm.
never been elected.
We've got our
So
good
I
old
don't know what
Gerald
that goes
Ford
to say
here.
about me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
So
Gerald Ford served as president without ever being elected to anything. So congratulations. You and him are in the same category.
There
and
you
just
go.
think about Ford's legacy.
Oh man, yeah, I like the idea that Italy as a nation is just calling you. Like we,
Exactly.
we need you to be a counselor.
Well, that's interesting.
The
So if
beau-
Italy as a nation were calling you Tito, what would they be calling you for?
Probably some egregious thing that I did back when I lived there.
Hmm.
oh, and get this: the person who called me from Italy was an Irishman. So
Oh, of
it
course.
was an Irish accent on an Italian number.
Mm.
Which, if we know anything, that's not the phone you would pick up because that's Quavine, right? That was like the
That
general
is exactly.
definitor.
Yeah.
So like,
Yep.
oh, this cannot be good.
Oh yeah. Oh my goodness.
I can say I've never received a phone call from Italy. Thankfully, I've never received a phone call from the Apostolic Nuncio, but I
Oh,
am prepared in case I ever do, which one of our friars taught us. If you ever get a call for something you don't want to do, and the church says, please be a bishop, people would say, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to decline for reasons that I can only share with my spiritual director and confessor.
yes.
Did you try that one?
No, you know, it's one of those things. I don't think I received the same formation as you, so I never got that. That I never got that way out.
Yes.
Yeah, it's
I
one to keep in your back pocket for later.
Yeah,
Definitely.
that definitely. I remember hearing that and going, "Oh, I'm going to hold on to this one." Oh my goodness.
But it
But
is, I mean, and I don't know if I'd actually use that. I have no interest in being a bishop, as I've talked about on TikTok last week. But I think seriously, if I were asked to do something, I think it would be a tough discernment and conversation because someone obviously trusts in you and would trust in me if I ever got that call. You have to take that seriously and see it as a service to others. I can't imagine knowing you that you were campaigning like I was freshman year of high school. I can't imagine you're like power hungry. It's a service to the brothers. It's a thankless job that no one really wants. I mean, how do you handle that discernment?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think if I was when I was younger in religious life, I would have been definitely more gung ho. Um,
Hmm.
in the sense of like there was a lot more. Um, well, I'm just different now, and I
Grizzly
think
old
part of
vet.
that is yeah, exactly. I think a lot of it's maybe I would like to think deepening in my spiritual life, try to be a little more patient, things
mm,
like that. So my own growth in character and my own growth in spiritual life. Um, yeah, so I think it's one of those things to where I I realize my spirituality is one of surrender. I think I
mm,
mentioned that at the chapter, is that, and part of, I think, the greatest form of surrender we see is the Annunciation. Greatest form of surrender we see in our St. Francis is the reception of the stigmata, but also at the very end when he wants to die with nothing, right? And he still,
mm,
even at the end, doesn't get what he wants and he accepts it.
Yeah.
So, like, my spirituality is to say I do,
mm.
is to say yes. I think that's really the whole goal of the Christian life is to say yes. Um, and that's hard because
Yeah.
normally we want to say no.
Well,
Mm.
how do you know which ones to say yes to? Because I mean, we don't want to just be a yes man, right? I
Right.
mean,
Yeah,
I'm bombarded with questions all the time. How do you
right,
know which ones to say yes and actually this is the time to say no?
right. No, that's a great question. Um, I think part of it, well, first thing, I think, and we all know this, is that there has to be some type of prayer dialogue.
Mm.
Who are you dialoguing with, right?
Yeah, right.
I used to teach, I was a high school teacher for 8 years,
Mhm.
and
Oh yeah.
I remember I would tell my students, especially seniors, when they were about to graduate, they were like, Father, do you have any suggestions? And I said, yeah, surround yourselves around good people.
Mm.
And I remember one student, his name was Charlie. He goes, well, Father, how do I know who's a good person? I said, wow, that's a great question. And I
Yeah.
said, they always are seeking what is good for you, not for themselves.
Mm.
They're always seeking what's good for you, not for themselves. And so I think when I'm discerning, I'm always thinking, you know, I'm looking at it through that lens of, what is, yeah, who am I talking to? Are they always having the best interests of me versus themselves? When the province is asking me to do these things, my brothers are asking me because they see something in me that I don't see in myself sometimes. Because I see my foibles and shortcomings, which I have
Sure.
plenty. I'm still a work in progress, but there's a lot of when I was asked those things, I realized there was a lot of trust, and I want to serve in the best way possible. So I also think that whenever a decision is being made or has been made, probably one of the best places to look is what's the fruit of it. And I think that's where the Holy Spirit comes in, peace and
Mhm.
joy and things like that.
I want to ask you about, so, Casey asked, hey, is this what you imagined yourself doing? And, obviously you said no. What did you imagine? Like going back to the early days, when you come in, you're a young, enthusiastic guy in initial formation.
I'm going to
What,
save the world.
right, yes. What did you imagine your Friar life being like? What kind of work did you imagine yourself doing? And did you get to do that?
That's a great question. I had no idea. The only thing once again, I didn't know friars growing up. There were no friars. So my exposure to the friars was through the internet.
Hmm.
And
Oh, wow.
the first time I met a friars, the vocation director came to Florida to just meet me and get to know me a little. And so then to come and see and all that stuff. But
Are you telling me I'm talking to two Floridians right now?
Yes.
absolutely.
Oh,
Yes.
man.
Keep
Well, it's
Florida
been
So,
nice
weird.
talking to you, Roger.
and that was a short podcast.
Yeah. That's why we do our
Uh,
background checks. Oops.
yeah. Yeah. So like, yeah, part of it is just kind of like, yeah. So I really had no idea. I knew what the Friars did, which was the diversity,
Mhm.
and that's really probably one of the greatest things. We're not founded to do a particular ministry or an apostolate.
Mm.
Is that our primary ministry? Let me rephrase that. Our primary focus is to be brothers, right? Is that our fraternity is the gift to the church. So anyway, I had so during initial formation, or those first few years when I was in simple vows, I did parishes. I went to parishes in the summer or doing different things like that, and those were all great. It wasn't until my year out that my formator says, why don't you do something that is outside of your, like what you normally wouldn't choose?" And I went to Roger Bacon to teach at high school
Oh,
and
my.
fell in love with it.
Yeah.
Actually, so much so, I asked the provincial not to continue for ordination.
Hmm.
And he
Wow.
goes, "Well, why don't
Let's
you?"
keep our options open
Yeah,
here.
he's like, "Just think about it. Maybe you should go back to school." And that's so
That's a
that was the
tough
whole
one,
thing.
though. I mean, those
Yeah.
internship years, you're in school for so long, you're in formation for so long. It's the first time you get treated like a real friar,
Mhm.
and you just get to go live the life. You get to go work, and
Yes.
you find a ministry like, oh man, this is what I've been waiting for 6 years. I
Yeah.
remember being at a place just going, I don't want to go back to school. Do I really
Yeah.
need to go back to school? I can keep doing this. But, there is that call to be a priest as well. And I'm very thankful I did. I'm sure you are as well. I've seen you, celebrate Mass and hear confessions. I think that's such an important part of our lives, the three of us.
Mm.
But it's amazing how you go to those new places and it's like, there's so much more out there than I expected.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, so I end up, and part of that going back to the spirituality is my spiritual director was fantastic. I
Wow.
kind of brought it to her, and she's a Port Clare nun, and she goes, Roger, you always talk to me about saying yes. I don't hear a lot of like yes in what you're thinking, because
Yikes, calling
I
you
was talking
out.
about, oh, it was great. Because I was always saying, well, this is what I want to do. This is what she goes, you always talk about we, and there's not, I'm like, oh man. So
That's the sign of a great spiritual director. The
she
Yeah.
was
best one I ever
so
had,
good.
I never once felt affirmed. Now, that's not to say that I felt like torn up or like made fun
Right.
of, but I never felt like he was a fan.
Mm.
I would
Yeah.
leave so often, and he would end with, well, sounds like you got some things to work on. I'm like, well, yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, I
So
definitely, yeah, I definitely
please.
know that feeling of, I remember during my own internship, by that point, I needed a break from studies. I had been, in initial formation in studies. I had been a college student before that, and not just like a college student on a trajectory towards religious life, but then even before that, studying to be a firefighter, doing all these different things. I was just burnt out from school. And having that year away of getting to just do ministry and reminded what all of the studies were leading to was just hugely beneficial. And it allowed me to come back and sort of be reinvigorated. Because I'll be honest, I was just kind of going through the motions the year before I went on internship. And then when I came back, I was like, no, I need to be a good student because I value the work that I want to do in the future. And this is preparing me for that.
So, brothers in formation, if you're watching, you'll make it through.
Yes.
It's worth it. Keep going. I'm thankful for all I've learned. I'm thankful I went back. It's so, so critical. But man, is it difficult when you get that little taste of freedom.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's and I think what we all realize is like we enter into this life to be with the people of God.
Mm-hmm.
And not to say we're not when we're in formation, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think our formation is really good about getting out, doing ministry as you're doing in a school and things like that. But there's something about to where my focus can be that. And all three of us know that's also the challenge, right? Is that sometimes the ministerial life sometimes overrides the fraternal life, and how do you keep it in balance?
Yeah. I want to go back to your time in high school because I am currently
Sure.
missing a week of school right now because it's snowing in Georgia. And I kind of miss my students. I was at the synod for a week and now it's been 4 days. Like, I just want to go back to school. I've, like yourself, never thought of myself as a teacher, never thought of myself working in schools, but had a similar experience, just fell in love with it. The students are joyful and like one of the best parts of my life, and then also grate my nerves every single day. And I think just a perfect story, and I'd love to hear your take if you have stories like this, was I give an assembly every Thursday called Thursday Thoughts, and I get to talk about anything I want, pull from scripture, pull from theology, something, but just give them some sort of hopeful message. And the one girl came to me, and she was a senior, and she said, "Father Casey, I really liked your Thursday Thoughts today. I usually don't, but today was great." It's like, why? Why did you need to add that last little bit?
Oh, it's the honesty. They still have that honesty of children. They haven't fully matured into the adults that they're going to be.
Tact is not their charism.
I had to use a story. I remember I was doing a vocation piece, so it was senior year. They're talking about vocations, and they want me to come in, and so I have a couple of photos of when I was in high school. And like I'm showing them on the overhead, and there's my prom picture with my date.
Ooh.
And one of the guys, Jake's in the front. He goes, "Wow, Father, wow, you looked pretty good back then." And I looked at him like, "Well, thanks, Jake. Maybe someday someone will say the same thing about you." And he goes, "What?" I'm like, "Just think about it."
Yeah,
It'll come to
and
you.
that's what you got to do. Just throw it right back at him.
Right. He didn't realize what he was saying, but I'm
Right.
just like,
Yeah.
"Thank you, appreciate that."
We could have done without the back then.
Yeah, back then, boy, back then you really were pretty good looking. I'm like, thank you.
Was that like 30, 40 years ago?
Yeah, I'm exactly when Ford was in office. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I've never seen you at the same place, same time. I don't know. It's a running theme here. Yeah, I mean, it just the funny, the honesty, and I have no idea where I was going with that. But the students, I had another story.
Oh yeah. No, I agree. I mean, they just once again they don't realize what they say. They say it and then they think later.
Right, right.
Yeah. But of course, some of our friars do the same thing. So
That's right. I was just going over the goals and the priorities for the synods. We're having our chapter today, and one of them was improve interpersonal skills among the friars. I was like, circle.
yeah. We made a couple of edits to the priorities.
Okay.
Nothing overly, but just a couple of editorial pieces in the sense of wanting to make sure that we're focusing on the person of Christ and the gospel, things like that. So there's
That was a few of my comments. Yeah.
yeah, and I think it's one of those things. It's like I think it's easy for us as an order, as brothers. It's like, of course, the gospel is important. Of course, Jesus Christ is the centrality of our life. but we also have to realize that these priorities are not just read by us.
Right.
They're read by our employees, our sponsored ministries, the larger church, and those are important to put. I don't believe people read preambles. I don't think they read those little minutios.
Hmm.
They're
I
just
don't
going to
even
read
read
the
introductions.
priorities.
Just get
Right,
to it.
exactly. Right,
Yes.
exactly.
It's 4 words.
So,
Come on.
right.
Yeah, well, and even to us, like I think it's helpful to remind us all the time of priority number one. Our elementary school reads the mission statement of the school every single day,
Yep.
which gets a little repetitive, but it's important. We're like, this is why we're here, and we're never going to forget this.
Right.
And I think, we get caught up in financial statements and serving the poor and paying for the house and very practical things. We got to learn how to be together with brothers, and those are all great, but they pour forth from a life in Jesus. And unless you remind yourself that, sometimes you get so much, whatever that square is, you get focused on the immediate, not important things, right? They're crises you got to handle right now. But what about the long-term important things? What is my life about? And I think that's what keeps us going in discernment, going back to what you've done and what you hope to do and all that. At the core of it, it has to always be Jesus, even if you say, oh, I didn't realize that I was going to serve him as a teacher. Didn't realize I was going to be a counselor. I didn't realize that, what's going to be next for you. You got to keep that foundation. Otherwise, you're just doing jobs over and over.
Yeah. I had a friar tell me very bluntly and honestly, because I need that.
Multiple times.
Yeah. He goes, Tito, you get distracted from the important by what's imminent, or by the urgent, and I just had to take it because I'm like, he's 100% right. He's just like, I really wanted to defend myself, and like every objection died before it crossed my lips because I was like, he's right. I get very distracted by the urgent or by the imminent, and I often allow the important to get pushed aside. And that conversation is what led to me in the situation that I'm in now of finishing up this undergraduate and doing these studies, preparing me for what's next. Because it was about figuring out what I was going to do after Siena. And he said, take care of the important. He goes, the urgent will always be there. Right now, you have to focus on the important. And I think that's a great principle to remember, is to not get so distracted by the urgent that we, never get to the important.
Well, I just love that all three of us have shared stories where a person had to show us our faults or just like be very harsh and direct with us. One of the ones that sticks out in my mind for me was in high school. I had a tendency to let the good be the enemy of great, or however that phrase is, where I was on a retreat one time and I was one of the planners of the retreat, and it did not go the way we planned. And I just got completely derailed. Just absolutely a mess. Like, I hate this. I want to go home. And my youth minister pulled me aside and he said, you're the only one not having a good time. He said, do you realize that you're setting up your expectations for failure? Stop it. And I was like, all right, I'm going to take 5 minutes. I'm going to go for a walk and I'm going to come back with a smile on my face. I got this.
There you go.
Yeah. I realized that too, is that I too have that perfectionist streak in me. And so I'm always aware, like, I just need to get to 80%. And then let's just move on. Because that last 20% just grinds it down to paralysis in me.
You end up spending the same amount of time on the 20% as you do the 80%. And not just say, well, good enough, who cares? But, like, the last 20% is not necessary for most things.
And I think that's also when trying to discern vocation, right? Is that sometimes I know that, like, when I was going through it, I wanted to be 100% sure that this is the order I need to join, that this is the vocation, maybe even this is the person I was supposed to marry. And it's like, man, if that's the case, then no one's going to do anything.
Yeah.
No one's going to do anything. I mean, whether it's a ministry I'm supposed to go into, ministry that I want to start, whatever it is, if you're shooting for 100% certainty, good luck.
I struggle with my high schoolers all the time, as I'm sure you did. They don't know, they have anxiety. It's like, it's going to be okay. Why don't we just take one step? And then you'll find that you have a better clarity. And you'll take one more step and you have better clarity. And even if you find out you took the wrong step, well, at least you know something. Now turn around. But, oh my gosh, just stuck, as you say, in paralysis.
Yeah.
It's a lot like being a pathfinder. I remember.
The Nissan Pathfinder?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Okay. I have no idea what we're talking about. Go ahead.
I remember very early on in my discernment, in general, I started off discerning with the diocese, and I went through a year and a half, almost 2 year process with them. At the end of which, I did not join the diocesan, or I did not apply. I applied to the diocesan priesthood, but I wasn't accepted. Part of that was the complication of my application getting confused with someone else's, which at
Oh,
the end
no.
at the end of a year and a half, I'm like, how can you have me confused with someone else? We've been talking for over a year.
Who do
Anyway,
you think you are?
so what that did to me is, as I was moving forward and starting to discern religious life and the Franciscans, I didn't want to move forward unless I had absolute certainty. So I know what you're talking about. I wanted that absolute certainty. I was like, listen, God, I did this once before. I got burned. And so I'm not going anywhere until I know for sure. And through, a good life of prayer, through having a good mentor and hearing some really good homilies, I was reminded that it's a journey. And sometimes when you're walking down the journey, you're going to take a wrong turn and you're going to find yourself at a dead end. And all you got to do is backtrack a little bit and keep moving forward. And that's what I mean where I say it's like being a pathfinder. You can't map out the journey that you haven't been on. You have to walk it first, and then you can go back and map it out. You have to figure it out, and you're going to make mistakes, and you're going to make some wrong turns. I mean, I joined the Friars, and then I ended up eventually transferring provinces. And then the province that I joined is now part of a bigger province. And
Tito doesn't understand straight lines.
I don't. But that's okay.
He's getting his undergrad after his master's. I don't know what's going on here.
I'm a loop. But that's been my journey. And as much as I would have loved a straightforward, easy to follow path, everything that I experienced taught me something, led me somewhere, and has ultimately gotten me here. And I'm still gonna, I'm sure, make wrong turns at points, but you have to keep walking.
Yeah, it's I do a lot of travel with the ministry that I'm in as a counselor, and the luster of air travel is quickly lost.
Oh, I know it.
Oh, yeah.
Quickly lost. And so I had to reframe it pretty quickly. And I used the image of pilgrimage. And this is not meant to be overly pious, but I believe in a pilgrimage, if you've ever been in a pilgrimage, which I think all of you have, is that you're going to get lost. Things are not going to go the we're supposed to. There's going to be a lot of obstacles and setbacks. But as cliche as it is, it's not about that destination. It's about seeing Christ as you're moving through life. And I think, when anyone's looking at discernment or just life in general, is that to look at it. I mean, from the very early part of the church, we called ourselves a pilgrim church, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the mentality, at least that helps me in air travel. Like I'm actually still in Florida. I was supposed to leave. I was supposed to leave on Wednesday, and but it's covered in snow, and flight was canceled. And then I was like, okay, well, I can leave on Thursday, but then I try to see like that means I have to move every piece of the trips up, and it would have cost way too much money.
Sure.
So I'm
Remind me
still
what
here.
regions you are. You're Italy, southern France, the Holy Land. Which are regions?
Right.
Exactly, the Mariana Trench, everything. But that's the thing.
When
Is
you
like,
talk about pilgrimage, it's usually not to St. Petersburg, Florida. And that makes it a little more difficult. But I think focusing on that, it's the journey, it's what you learn along the way, and what God is doing with it. You might not notice for 5 more years. It's
Absolutely.
been kind of a kick I've been on recently. We're going through some trials and just being frustrated. Like, why do I got to go through this? And I just want to land. I just want to get to where I'm going. And then you realize, it was the journey who made me capable of doing what I need to do.
Mm-hmm.
And had I not gone through that journey, had I not, skidded on the runway or, had to get off the plane and do 10,000 things, I wouldn't have been able to do the task I was being asked to do. Do you find that in hindsight where you're like, you know what? It's a cliche, but there is absolute truth to everything happens for a reason. There's something to God working through. Maybe not every little minutia, but you start to see that hand and say, now I'm starting to see.
Yeah, I'd say that he uses everything for good. He can use
Mm,
everything for good.
yeah.
I may not see it,
Yeah.
but I think that's where faith requires me to is inviting me to trust in that.
Mm.
I mean, like Tito, you're at Bonaventure, is like talk about a big detour on there, but I'm imagining you found a lot of good that's happening there.
Absolutely. The work that I'm doing right now, I just came out of a class. It's called documentary filmmaking, and I can already see how this class in particular is really helping me to prepare for the next step. For the work that we'll be doing in the future, but as well as the work that I want to do and I would like to see being done more of in the province.
Yeah. And like we said, no straight paths there.
Right?
But you probably wouldn't have been ready for that 10 years ago. And
Nope.
that's the hard thing to realize is, dang it, all of this is fitting together in the way it needs to.
Exactly.
And there are obviously tragedies. There are obviously failures. There are obviously roads that we go down. And the lesson we learn is, I didn't want to go down that road. But I do think, as Roger say, there can be good that comes from all of it. And we find ourselves often in places, it took a while to get there because we needed it to take a while.
Right. Yeah, I think everything can be a formative piece. Um, Everything can be a salvific piece, right? Everything can be. Um, there's grace so much. It's just kind of being able to see it, and I think that's like what I ask the Lord is like, Lord, just help me to be open to that grace because I know it's there. Just help me to be open to it.
It might sound like a transition, odd question here, but I'm curious your thought on the only unforgivable sin talked about by Jesus is a sin against the Holy Spirit. Where I can actually, and what I think of it is, I think it's despair. It's like cursing the Holy Spirit or turning away from the Holy Spirit to say, no, I can't be forgiven. No, there's nothing you can do to help me. I think that for me, that's the only thing that can get between us and God is our own resistance. Otherwise, I think you turn around, God's already there waiting for you. Do you have a similar, different take on that?
I remember I would talk about hell with students,
Mm.
and of course, there's everyone has the image. Many people have the image of fire, right, and things like that. And if God is love, and think about what that is, right? So God is joy, God is peace, all that stuff. So heaven is the fullness of that, right? So then hell would be the opposite, right? It would be that there's no hope or joy. It's the absence of all those things. Is that
Florida.
No.
under snow? Yes,
Yes.
absolutely.
Hell has frozen over.
Yeah. So if that's hell, then why would anyone want that, right?
Mm.
Wouldn't everyone want heaven if given a choice? But think about what that means is that it's also forgiveness
Mm.
and surrender and all that stuff. There are a lot of people out there that don't want that. They've conditioned themselves, they've closed out that heart. No, if that means forgiveness and that means that type of patience in it, I'm not interested in that. I
Yeah.
want to, whatever it is. And God says, well, I can't force you. So very well.
It's like
And,
C.S.
and
Lewis's The Great Divorce. I don't know if you've ever read that.
beautiful
I mean,
image.
incredible book.
Absolutely.
The one scene where a guy comes down from heaven as a guide, and it just so happens to be the murderer of the guy's brother. And he
Yeah,
says, I'll show you the way. And he says, if you're in heaven, I don't want anything to do with heaven. And
right.
it's like, oh, it's so sad. He's like, but it doesn't matter now. I've been forgiven. He can't forgive him. He can't enter heaven.
Yeah.
We do that every day. Like, I do think we make some minor decisions like that where I say, nope, I'm going to choose to be closed off and do what I want.
Or I'm going to choose to be frustrated, or I'm going to choose to be miserable. And all it does is isolate us from the people around us, right? Because and those are the people who are going to help us get out of misery, who are going to help us get out of our frustration. And instead, we kind of keep them either at arm's length or we kind of put up our spines, and they don't want to come around us anymore. And then, of course, we see it as, see, this is why I'm miserable, because I'm alone. It's like, well, we made ourselves alone.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I love the image one of our friars said a number of years ago. It's like you're at a party maybe it's your birthday party, and things don't go exactly right. You get something embarrassing, so you run to your room in tears and you slam the door. And then you realize that you're really embarrassed. But everyone's waiting. Everyone's there for you. They want you to come back. All you have to do is come back to the party, and it's going to be a party. I think that's what purgatory is. I think that's what leads to hell. I mean, hell is kind of a permanent state, but that self-choosing of agony. You just got to suck it up and say, I made a mistake, and this is embarrassing, and I'm willing to live through this. And then everyone welcomes you back. But man, is it tough sometimes. Like,
You're talking about provincial council meetings. Absolutely.
Oh, do tell. Spill some tea.
Oh, well, I mean, like as brothers. So for those who are not familiar, provincial council is our provincial minister. So who's the superior and his vicar. And then he has us as his counselors who provide advice and suggestions. And, I think a healthy form of that type of leadership is that you should have respectful dissent. Is that, like you said, we're not all yes men, right?
Yeah.
Is that while I promise obedience and support to the provincial minister, it's ultimately the province and the order that, so it's like, if that's not in the best interest of the order, I have a duty to tell the provincial saying, I don't think that's a good idea. And part of that, I mean, at our council meetings, we do argue, we do debate. There are moments when it's like, I need a break, and the provincial's like, let's do 10 minutes, and it's just like, so absolutely. And there's times
there's
when
so many things to fill in there too, because we get the provincial council minutes, and often there's just one line that says, personnel decisions were discussed, and like, what were these personnel matters?
Oh, sure.
I'm sure they took out 3/4 of the conversation.
Right. And then right after that, and then the council broke for 30 minutes.
In tears, broken tears. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, personnel is the bulk of what we do.
Yeah.
And absolutely. And, of course, it's to safeguard people's private, those certain elements of privacy. But no, absolutely. But that isn't that what you want in any type of decision making, right? Going back to, it's like, you shouldn't, I used to tell my students, listen, if you're trying to make a decision while your friends love you, are your friends going to tell you the hard things you need to hear? A lot of times, no.
Yeah.
Because they're afraid of hurting that friendship. The best of friends, true friends, as Aristotle says, right, will will what is best for the friend because they're your friend. And that is love, right? We would know that as Christian love. I will what's best, even at the cost of self. So,
I'm curious what that's like, though.
Crazy.
Those council meetings. You've now had maybe 4.5 years of so. You've had a couple years. You've had the veil lifted a little bit in the Friars, and it's not like everything's a secret. We know brothers. We know some issues. We know some joyful things.
Yeah.
How has that changed your vocation to be kind of behind it and seeing? And I don't want to scandalize, and so maybe you can kind of give some light to this.
No.
Our viewers, we're humans as well, and some. It's not all like this friar murdered this friar. It could be just like, hey, two guys are not getting along. How do we help them through this? How are those conversations affecting your vocation?
The reason why I joined the Friars was because I saw them as brothers, a family. Now, if we take any family, there's going to be disagreements. There's going to be yelling. Sibling will hurt sibling. But at the end of the day, God willing, we come back together. We speak our mind, and we repair and move on. As a counselor, I'm dealing with my brother's lives. And part of that is to admonish them. Part of that is to see them in when sin is involved, but it's not to give up on them. That's the biggest piece. Like God doesn't give up on us. Thank you. But today,
so many opportunities to
preach it. So, that's the piece. Is like, if anything, it doesn't diminish my vocation. It reinforces what it means to be a brother. Is that we're all on a journey. We're all on a pilgrimage. Some of our brothers are further on that pilgrimage than others. Some man, we just want you to get up. Like get up, just walk, just take a couple
Put your shoes
steps.
on.
Yeah, exactly. You've sat too long, um, and but still love them,
Yeah.
and it's like, yeah, and that's where the piece is like any brother. It's like some of them don't want to get up, and it's like, well, we're not gonna let go, but we're still gonna encourage. Um, and sometimes we have to ask them, do you still want to be a brother with us?
Mm.
And that's the hard piece. Is like, do you still want to be a brother with us?
Hmm.
Um, because we, as us, we know we also have our own shortcomings.
Sure.
We're
I'm
as
great.
Tito, we need to have a
phenomenal.
conversation afterwards.
It's gonna be good.
because
It's gonna
because
be
true
great.
friends tell each other, Tito. So we're gonna have a talk off air. Get ready.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to do
No,
that.
no, no, no. I mean, and I think let's reciprocate this. Is that um, the brothers are patient with us
Yeah.
as,
We
as a council.
we
I'd love
talked
to
about
hear
how
that.
we yeah.
It's like, how are you guys patient with us in our own decision making and our own,
Hmm.
direction? Please.
Well, how much time do we have? Feedback for the council.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's right. We're restarting the video.
Yeah. But no, I mean, we talked about earlier how important those people in our lives, those spiritual directors, those mentors who corrected us and put us on the right path. And yet, I think we're so afraid sometimes to correct other people because we live in the extremes. Either it's condemnation, I hate you and you're terrible, or I have to support you in every way. But that's not the way that we experience other people. So why would we experience our own criticism that way? I think there's a lot of fear. And we've talked about this in fraternities sometimes where I think one of the reasons we don't correct each other is we're afraid of being corrected back. And so it requires that mutuality, reciprocity of I'm willing to change if you're willing to change. And we're going to be brothers to each other, not me, the Lord over you, to say, here's all the things you do wrong. That's not helpful.
No. One of the things that that came up while we were at the synod, we discussed the importance of fraternal accountability, right? And one of the things that I mentioned at my table was, fraternal accountability gets a whole lot easier when we feel emotionally safe. And I'm not going to pretend like this is my own idea. I got this from listening to Simon Sinek, but he talks about the importance of emotional safety, of when we trust, when we're able to trust that our bosses or our brothers or guardians have not just what is best for us in mind, but also the capacity to recognize that we are struggling emotionally, or what we're about to hear might be emotionally sensitive, and they're able to frame things respecting that. It becomes a whole lot easier, and we trust more, and we're more open to correction. And so I'm going to try to be more emotionally aware as I communicate in the future of considering the emotional safety of the person that I'm speaking to, and hoping that they can reciprocate and consider my emotional safety as we move forward and as we continue to be in fraternity, be in relationship, and correct each other when necessary.
So
Yeah.
important. And it takes either party to take the first step. I remember I lived with a guy some time ago, and he wasn't my favorite brother. And there were some very obvious flaws. We all have flaws, and some of our flaws are a little more internal. His were external, and he was tough to get along with. And after dinner one night, he said to the whole community, he said, "Do you mind if we meet after prayer? I'd like to share something." And just unprompted, he gave kind of a life story and the struggles he'd faced, and his disappointments and his betrayals. And it gave this whole context of, oh, that's why you're guarded. Oh, that's why, I can't really trust you and you don't really trust other people. And, it didn't make everything perfect, but it was such a moment of, oh, this man's willing to take a risk. That gives me the freedom to take a risk as well. And those things can be such great moments of leadership from a guy that, has never been provincial. It doesn't necessarily have leadership qualities as we traditionally expect them, but that was an opportunity of humility, which I think we need so much in our brothers as the first step to leadership.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail right on the head. Is that it's the trust is always built. Very rarely is it freely given. Is that and part of that is vulnerability is the key in order to enter into it. So I would you know if I look at myself, like whenever I'm sharing with brothers, I said, yeah, I understand. Like, I struggle with anger all the time, like all the time.
I'm a
And
counselor.
yeah, is that, and part of my anger is rooted in expectation. I have expectations that I create and on myself, on others. And when it doesn't happen, then the anger wells up and just having to navigate like what expectations are healthy, which ones are not. But sometimes sharing something as simple as that, once again, not only, and I think that's what like Paul talks about it, right? St. Paul is like, it's only through weakness that strength is found. Is that's the key. I think that's what our Father Francis realized, right? Is that it's the journey downward, that surrender of even our reputation. I think that's really where our vow of poverty comes in. Is that if I'm able to let go of what people even think about me, or the perception of power and strength, but rather is to be simple, as Francis says, simple and subject to all. Really, that's what a leader is? Oh, that's the leader I would get behind. Absolutely, which is very different than maybe what our society sees and what our country sees.
Sure. And what we talked about with the high schoolers, you'll never have certainty. You may go to a
Yeah.
fraternity, you'll never know if they're going to gossip about what you've said, that you don't know if they're going to support you. You don't know if it's going to be successful. And so if you live by only certainty, you're going to be walled off and you're never going to have any relationships. And so sometimes you got to take that leap, whether it be in the fraternity or asking that girl out or that guy out, or making a new friend, going up to someone and saying, hey, I like your shoes, where'd you get them, just starting conversations. It is something that high schoolers really struggle with these days. And I'm not saying I'm an expert, but those social skills really, they rest on that willingness to take a risk and say, I want something. It's a funny video I saw a number of years ago where someone was setting up this skit and they said, do you want this person? And they pulled this person out and they had a name tag that said new best friend. And they're like, yeah, more than anything. And then they pulled the name tag down and it said stranger. He's like, well, you're going to have to talk to him. He's like, oh, where'd you get that person from? Take him away. Take him away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, having worked in a college for 4 years, now being at another college, the previous one that I was at, I had students at least once a year, at least, and usually multiple times, come up to me and after some interaction or whatever, and just say, "How do you just talk to people?" Because because I would just go up and start and engage with a group of students. So like, hey, can I join you? They're like, yeah, sure. And I would just start chatting with them. Or we would be putting on an event and people would be walking by and I would say, hey, we're doing this event. I said, you want to come? And they're like, oh yeah, no, sorry. And I remember one of the students said, she goes, if I invited someone and they said no to me, I would be devastated. And I'm like,
Yeah.
why? I don't even know her. She's just some random person. Like I'm not emotionally invested in her. Yes, I'm invested in getting this thing to go. And that means asking as many people as possible. And yeah, there's that fear, I suppose, but I think it's just more intimidation than anything else. It's a lack of practice. I had to, and I think Casey, you too, you had to engage with new people. We both moved as kids. We both went to new places, and you either introduce yourself to new people and got to know them and develop that skill, or you didn't. And I think a lot of not only do most people not move around like we did, but I think also a lot of people have friendships facilitated by someone else, whether it's their parents or something else, and so they aren't pushed into an environment where they have to develop it on their own.
There's a great scene from the movie The Green Book that came out several years
Mm,
ago, and it's if you remember, is that it's this one African American who's a savant pianist, but it's in the 1960s, and he has a kind of a bodyguard who's this white Italian, and anyway, they get to know each other. It's about self-discovery, but the pianist is just he's very distant from people. And at the very end of the movie, this is not a spoiler, um, the uh, the Italian invites him over for dinner. It's a Christmas dinner. He's like, "Come over, Doc. Come over. Come over." And he goes, "No, no, Tony. No, it's fine." So he disappointed. He goes and turns around. He stops at the door and he turns and looks at the African American pianist and says, Doc, there's a lot of lonely people out there waiting for others to make the first move."
Mm.
Mm.
And that's the thing, right? I think a lot of times we think, well, someone else will initiate it. Someone else needs to. And I think it comes back to those expectations versus there is a risk.
Mhm.
Everything. And taking that first step, as difficult as it is, scary as it is, discernment, dating, whatever it is, it is. But the opportunity that it opens is just so vast.
Well, and I think also being too picky. I think that's
Mm,
one of the reasons we stop. And I see that in myself sometimes. Like you look at people like, oh, well, that's not the type of person I want to be around.
Mhm.
But then when I look at some of my closest friends that I've had since college, I look at how we met. And there is no depth to it whatsoever. I mean, we lived on the same dorm. We liked the same music. We went to
Yeah.
parties. Like there was no depth whatsoever because that's not the way relationships start.
Nope.
Sometimes you just got to start with the shallow things, which is, hey, I like the same music or I like your shoes. Hey, let's talk. We've got something in common. And then it's now been 15 years, more than that now, you look and you say, oh, we've built a life together and we've kind of grown to understand each other. And yeah, we're still maybe not, absolutely perfect for one another, but now we have this history that we've built that trust, as you said. It's not earned and it doesn't come miraculously. And sometimes it starts with, hey, I'm going to take a risk with this person I don't even know and have nothing in common with. See what comes of it.
I can tell you, my dad's best friend growing up was a guy that the first time they met, they got into a fight.
Great guy relationship.
Yeah, he was playing baseball and somebody hit a foul ball and it went by this guy and this guy picked it up and he goes, "Hey, can I get that ball back?" And the guy goes, "Nope." And so they end up fighting, and this is at school. So they get, like detention or something together, and they have no choice but to talk to each other for the next couple of hours, and then they became best friends.
This sounds like a movie.
So,
Best
so the
friends in
moral of the
detention.
story is get into fights.
Get into fights.
Yes. Tito always with the words of wisdom.
Yeah. But I think it's to your point. You never know what it is, and it's never something, as you said, that deep. Being a kid on the playground. Do you like Spider-Man? I like Spider-Man. Great, we're best friends now. Oh,
Yeah.
you like this football team? I like that football team. That it really is just those easy things, and it's just the people. It's the relationship that's built up over time. It's the fact that it's survived petty fights. It's survived, distance sometimes. And that's what makes it a deep, meaningful relationship. It's the time and the work that's been put into it over that time.
Well, and
Mike, oh, sorry, please.
I was just going to think, it's sort of this conversation. Tito and I, before you came on, Roger, were like, hey, we really like Roger. We, reached out to him, wanted him to come on. None of us have ever lived with him. We don't actually know all that much about him.
Because that would change everything.
Well, yeah, it's one of those things where like there's probably lots of people in your life that are like that. We're like, hey, I get good vibes from that guy, and I've always enjoyed our conversations. But have I taken the next step to invite him onto a podcast? Like have those conversations.
Right.
And I think the Friars have a lot more in common than we think, and we have a lot more compatibility. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we're not in the right situations, but sometimes it just takes a little bit of, as we say, vulnerability. Sometimes not being as picky. Sometimes just stepping out and saying, I'm going to tone myself down a little bit, and I'm going to make this work. And so we've been delighted to have you on the show. We'd love to live with you someday. As soon as you're done being councilor and then provincial and then
2020. Whoa, 2026. No more phone calls from Italy. None.
Well, see, that's the thing. They won't come from Italy. They'll come from Kansas City when we're all together for chapter.
Yes.
You're not getting away from appointments at this point now. You've made too many friends.
We'll see.
You got to work on that. The next year and a half, burn some bridges, make some terrible decisions.
Make some waves.
Yeah. Thank you. It's been great being with you guys. Thank you so much for what you do. And I do hope that anyone who sees this is that, and I know that you guys probably do the same, is that every month I offer a mass for vocations.
Hmm.
And that's not just vocations to the order, it's anyone who's discerning vocations. Um, so just whoever is watching this, I just hope that, and Casey and Tito, thank you so much for what you're doing in this. But I hope this does help people just be open to God's grace.
Thank you.
Yeah. And thank you for allowing us to do this. I don't
Yeah,
mean that you're paying for it, but you do the hard work so that we can do the fun work. So
that's right.
we appreciate your service.
Thank you.
All right. God bless. We'll be praying for you.
Thank you.
So, Tito,
Yes,
pretty good guy, that Roger.
I love him. He's awesome. Honestly, like we were talking about beforehand, I don't know that much about his background. I feel like I've gotten to know him a little bit better this time around, but he's always enjoyable to talk to, and I look forward to getting to know him more in the future.
Yeah, it's good that we can at least trust one of those guys on the
Oh my
council. I don't know about the others, but I think it's hilarious. He's the Gerald Ford. I mean, just when we talk about serving, and like none of us really, it's a thing that the world doesn't understand, but none of us really want to be in leadership. We don't want to be provincial. We don't want to be in charge. We join this life because we want to serve. Like that,
Right.
I know people are not going to believe me when I say that, but that's just the Friar mentality.
Yep.
And so to not only be on it twice, but to have it come from out of nowhere, you're like, well, all right, this is my call from people on high. I have to say yes. And so I think I'm taking that from his conversation of just, I think we got to say yes more. We got to be open to the calling of the Spirit and the needs of our brothers around us.
Yeah, especially when the temptation so often is to say no, whether it's because you're comfortable where you are or because you feel intimidated by, what you're being called to do, asked to do. There's many reasons why to say no. But I think one, our vow to obedience is something that we have to keep in mind. And two, trust in the brothers who are asking us to do it. I think that's really important for us to remember. It's not just an obedience thing, it's a trust thing. It's, hey, your brother's asking you this and they have a reason for it, whether they see something that you don't see in your skills or whether, they really need your help as a brother and as a member of the fraternity.
Yeah, and sometimes listening to that call comes from the brothers. Sometimes it comes from the Holy Spirit. Sometimes it leads to some really great things, which we've been hinting at for a while. We still are not going to tell you what it is, but I think we can say this much, Tito. We have new assignments coming at some point.
Yes, we do.
We have new assignments. So
Yes.
thank you for listening all the way in. You get that little bit of extra information someday soon. We're going to get a little bit more what that's going to be. I trust you're all going to be excited about what we're doing next. It will come eventually. Keep listening and you will get the full story. But keep listening because there are too many people with main character syndrome in our world. Thank God for these minor characters. God bless the brothers.